Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a brand new episode of the Muslim Vibe. We're back, it's official. So we've been on a long break, as you probably already know. Salim has resigned from the Muslim Vibe, so in the meantime we've just been kind of working on a bunch of different things to kind of deal with that transition, and I've been kind of working on building up my confidence and making sure I can get everything set up to start recording this podcast officially and properly and regularly. So new mics and new camera and a new office. And also just a little bit of background, I've moved to California. I should probably introduce myself. I'm the co-founder of the Muslim Vibe, CEO / creative director. In today's episode, we're going to be speaking with Salim, talking about the departure from the Muslim Vibe. Going to be talking a little bit about his new role at Zahra Trust, a Muslim charity based in the UK that do a lot of work in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. So he's got some very interesting stories to share from his last few months that he's been working there. That's pretty much it. So let's jump straight into the conversation with Salim. Been a long time, my friend.
Well, we got there in the end after half an hour of technical issues.
Yeah, we have. Just a little insight for everyone. Salim just actually helped me set this whole thing up. Obviously, he's the guy that's been behind the podcast, and now we're in different positions. So it's probably actually worthwhile explaining that to the guests, isn't it? Because we've been on a very long break. They're probably wondering what's happened, where you've disappeared to. So I guess it's time for us to have that discussion and share with our listeners, our avid listeners.
So for all of those people, I guess that have been heavily invested in the podcast, all 7 of you, thank you very much for being there for all these years. But no, I mean, jokes aside, so yeah, it's been a while. I think at the time I've now officially left the Muslim Vibe. And at the time when we were kind of going through this and this transition and everything else, we were discussing putting out a podcast, putting out a statement or whatever, but I think we just didn't in the end. And now it feels like sufficient time has passed where we just move on. The podcast resumes and life goes on, but unfortunately I'm not going to be there anymore. Definitely, actually, it's probably one of the things I'm going to miss the most about the Muslim Vibe. It was, 7 years? We were working together on that project.
7 years. 8 years in total, including the year before that it took to kind of do all the work.
But like in that time, there's been so many amazing conversations and people that I've met, and that we've both like shared experiences we've had, like random meetings and funny stories that some we can tell people, others we can't. But it's a lot to look back on, and I think definitely for me one of the best things has always been the podcast, just because like having the experience of speaking to so many people, and hopefully you'll experience it as well. Like you get to reach out to people that are doing amazing things and just pick their brains for an hour. And I guess if there's one piece of advice, although I don't think you've asked, but one piece of advice I'd give you is like always ask that why question. It sounds like a stupid idea. It sounds like a stupid thing to say.
Why should I do that?
Because genuinely, that's one of the things I learned along the way, is that like when you just ask people why and let them talk, like you really get to like a person's essence, and understand. So if you were to ask me, for example, why I loved talking to people, it's because I love connecting with other people. I love listening to other people's perspectives and takes, and you know me, like I can talk all day and all night. But sometimes on the podcast, it was just a case of shutting up and listening, and trying to understand a different perspective, and then just probing further and asking that kind of next question. And I think sometimes people kind of give themselves to the opportunity or like to the occasion. Other times you'll find people are very guarded and kind of don't want to speak, and you got to try and break them out of their shell. But again, that's something I do enjoy. Like, you know, even from a social perspective, like if we go out and there's one person that's a bit quiet, I like kind of talking to them, trying to include them in the conversation, get them in on the banter and everything else. So it's fun. And I think for me, I always saw it like there were these conversations with super amazing kind of high achieving people. And I'm just lucky enough to be the one that's asking them questions. And then I hope that people kind of benefit from the conversations, and we obviously try and make it relevant and everything else. But yeah, we're on the other side now.
We're on the other side. Yeah, so much has happened this year. You've left the Muslim Vibe. You're now working for a charity. I've moved to California. It's just so much has happened in such a short period of time as well. Because it was like
The Office. It was like so obviously we're obsessed with the show The Office, but like the last few weeks in our office felt like the end of like a 10-season episode, because we had so many like cameos, people dropping in and dropping out, and then just one by one.
Well, like even the main office we moved, right? Like isn't even the main office.
Yeah,
like the actual team, we had to move our actual office location. So just to kind of fill the listeners in. So like I said, Salim left in, I think it was June, right? June?
March? End of May.
End of May.
June.
Yeah, end of May,
Yeah,
June.
end of May.
It was end of Ramadan is basically when it was, I think, right? And so since then, obviously we haven't been doing any podcasts and stuff, and I've just been kind of like mustering up my own like confidence and everything to kind of take it on, because this is usually not my forte. Like, and I wanted to make sure I had everything set up properly as well, and I didn't want to do it in front of people. Like I don't know how you did this in front of. I'm under so much pressure right now, even though you're like someone I know, like literally like the back of my hand. I've got no one with me right now, and I'm still feeling a bit like, you know,
the
anxious.
worst ones. So I don't like the video recorded ones anyway. I don't mind when it's my webcam, because I can just zone out and ignore everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, I put banners in front of your face so you couldn't actually see me.
Yeah.
But when we were sat and we had like the 2 cameras set up in the office, sorry, those were the worst, because I remember there was like the Sex in Islam podcast, and that's already like a very sensitive topic. And I think that day was like a packed office. There was like 5 people sat behind me, all just working, and I'm conscious of that. I'm conscious of like not saying anything inappropriate, and you know, making sure you have the conversation the right way. That it's awful. Trust me. Like, just having one person in the room is one too many. So you just have to pretend like everyone's just no one's listening, no one's actually paying attention. But yeah, it wasn't nice. That's the one thing I didn't like about the podcast in the office, because there was.
So Salim, tell me. I think people want to know what's your best memory of the Muslim Vibe, and what's your best? What do you think your best podcast was? You can answer that question in whichever order you want.
So I think in terms of memories, some of the moments when like one of the first ones was, I think in the first year, I don't know if you remember, we had kind of forecasted figures for what we wanted to achieve and what we wanted to reach.
Spreadsheet sessions.
Yeah, and then one time we sat down in a meeting, like a year on, we're like, let's review, let's see where we're at. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the numbers were pretty much spot on.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like this is incredible. We've achieved X, Y, Z. But then we kind of said, well, we forecasted this as well. Like all we've done is just matched what we were expecting or what we wanted to achieve.
For sure.
So that was, I think, a very nice moment. In terms of like actual things, I think like the first time we had that This Is Not My Islam video, the response to ISIS that Sana Sino, the spoken word artist, had done. And I think like at the time BBC Trending got in touch and they were interested in profiling. They never did. If I'm not mistaken, Piers Morgan retweeted that one.
Yeah, he did.
Sami Yusuf as well. And so that was the first time and that was, I think, January. We had launched in October 2014. That was January. And I think since then there's been loads of these kind of viral moments and verified accounts and all of this stuff. But like that was the first time. I think Eamon Holmes from ITV at one point followed us, still does probably.
Yeah, he started following us, yeah.
Yeah, that these moments were nice, but the first time it happened was this video. And that's when I think I don't know about you, but I kind of realised that, oh, actually we might be onto something here with this platform. Mm-hmm. Like we have the potential to get into the mainstream and get our narrative across. And actually this platform, it does serve a purpose. Obviously that was always the intention, but it was like very early on, within 3-4 months, we saw something very quickly get that kind of virality that we knew we could achieve. In terms of podcast, so I was telling you just before, because we were talking about the technical side of things. So there was a sister, I can't remember her name, that worked at Sky News in Australia. And I think after the Christchurch terrorist attack, she decided to leave her job. And that became like a little mini story at the time. And I got in touch with her and she was like, yeah, I'll happily do an interview. And it was an amazing conversation we had. She was saying, like, again, there's no sort of bias, or you don't want guests to necessarily say a particular thing. But she was, from my perspective, like, from a biased perspective, she was saying all the right things, all the things that I wanted to hear and I believe when it comes to talking about the media, representation, everything else. And I was like, this is amazing. I can't wait for this to go out, because her story had like made it a little bit, but I thought actually once you hear her speak in full, this is huge. People will really kind of resonate with this. And then for whatever reason, like throughout the whole audio, there's just this crackling. And it's not even like a crackling that you can ignore or you can edit out. It was just consistent crackling. Something had gone wrong and we just couldn't use it. And by the time we were potentially able to re-record, the moment had gone. You know how it is. Like
yeah.
And even like even when you record like a video as well, if there is a technical issue and you try and record it again, it's never quite the same. And I knew we wouldn't be able to, like, because the way the conversation happened, and obviously like thoughts are popping up in my head in real time as she's talking, and I'm just jumping in, and then she's kind of answering me, and it was such a beautiful narrative. So that was like one of those frustrating ones, like one that got away almost. In terms of favorite podcast, I think there's three or four with Jawad Shamali that we recorded. Those I think were always really good because, again, from like a slightly personal or selfish perspective, I would read like some book. Like one of them was, I think, The Power of Now, or The Surrender Experiment. And then off the back of that would give him a call and say, let's record a podcast. And we would discuss the book and the concepts in the book. So, like after you've watched a good movie, you go out with your friends and you talk about the film. This was like, you go out with someone who's into philosophy and you discuss the philosophy of the book. So that was a lot of fun. And I was lucky enough, I think, to be able to do that. And again, I think, based off the feedback that we got, a lot of people resonated with those conversations, especially people who had read the book. But even then, we made the conversations kind of broad enough that even if you hadn't, you would still enjoy it. I always look back on the Asim Qureshi podcast as well. I can't remember the name of his book. Do you remember the name of his book?
I Refuse to Condemn or something like that.
No, that was the compilation that he was a part of afterwards. I'm not going to Google it. Remember. It's fine.
But that was a good podcast. I was there in the office when you were recording that, and I was just like, "Wow, this is like really, really good."
So even that book, his book is phenomenal, and I recommend it to everyone because it's for me it just says everything and is that kind of almost definitive manuscript explaining the context of being Muslim in Britain and 9/11 and understanding terror laws, prevent, all of this kind of stuff. But it just presents a very well-rounded perspective, and it's from his side, it's very kind of personal, but he also ties in Islamic history and kind of almost theology as well, which is something that you don't see very often. You either see a contemporary political book or you see like a religious manuscript. You don't see the two combined. So that in particular, I think was one. I haven't listened back to that actually. I remember the video, again, we had technical issues on the video for that, if you remember.
Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, like there were vast chunks of it just went missing.
Like, I think 20-minute bits that just didn't record, so we could never use the video for that, but the audio of that podcast was really good. But this is the thing, this is the fun of like...
as in, this recording probably get messed up now as well. Hopefully not.
It's all good. We can do it again. But yeah, I think those ones definitely stand out.
So I think our listeners probably want to know what you're up to now. Like, so you've left the Muslim Vibe. What have you been working on?
So I guess I can give you the kind of condensed story. So I made the decision in Ramadan to leave the Muslim Vibe. I waited to tell you until after the month of Ramadan because I don't believe conversations like that should be had on an empty stomach or like a too full stomach. And there's no in between, unfortunately, in Ramadan. So I was like, let me wait it out. And my thinking was that after I've spoken to you and I kind of, post on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and whatever else, I'll just see what's out there. Like, I didn't have a plan. I think for me, I want to be able to spend my time doing something that's of value to the community, giving back in whatever way I can. And I like to think that, over the years with the Muslim Vibe, I've gained a little bit of experience in certain areas. So that was on my mind, and I'm like, okay, I'll see what comes my way. And then in the last week of Ramadan, I got a call from Sheikh Masumian, who's the head of the Zahra Trust. And he basically said, I've got a role that I want you to have at the Zahra Trust. I think you'd be perfect for it. I'd love to, chat to you more about it. And he's like, I know you're involved with the Muslim Vibe, but I feel there's still a way you can do it. Maybe take a bit of a backseat and come on board here. And there's, loads of opportunity and we're growing as an organization, all of this stuff. And so when he said that, for me, it ticked that box. Like I said, all I want to do is be able to serve the community and give back. And to be honest, I said yes simply because I didn't see a point. I was like, I had this whole month, by the way, you can imagine, it wasn't like a straightforward, like, okay, I'm going to leave the Muslim Vibe, that's it. Like, I was anxious and worried. Like, I don't know how Haseeb's going to take it. I don't know what's going to happen. What's it going to be like? Is it, is everything going to be okay afterwards? All of that stuff. But the one thing is also, I wanted to find something that, would be something that would help support my family, but also continue in the kind of line of work. And I do still see it very much as being community facing in that sense, like uplifting in some way that's involved within Islamic work, if that makes sense. I don't know. It's almost like a bit cringe / cliche, but you know what I mean. Like the kind of stuff that we're doing is what I'm passionate about. And so that's it. So now end of May I left TMV. Middle of June, my son was born, so I had a second kid. In case you didn't know, Haseeb.
Congratulations.
Letting you know. Thank you very much.
How is he doing?
Yeah, he's good. He's 5 months now, I think. But yeah, so Laith was born middle of June, and then middle of July I started working. And I don't know if you remember, I think we spoke in between that time, and you were asking, oh, how's it going? He was like a few weeks or a few months, I think a few weeks old. And I was just telling you I was loving life because it was like the first time I had 6 weeks not having to kind of keep my eye on TMV stuff. And obviously at the time there was like, we're moving office and we have to find a new place and everything else. And so going from that constant, not stress, but you know what I mean? Like, mental...
Yeah, it's in the background. It's constantly in the background.
Yeah.
And I last night, I think I had a dream about like stuff that I've got to do for the Muslim Vibe. Like, I think that's what I did the whole last night. I was working in my dreams.
So going from that to like having 6 weeks, obviously at home, changing nappies and just spending time at home was so nice to have that kind of break. And then mid-July, so my son was a month old at this point, started working at the Zahra Trust. And my role is basically working across marketing, media and comms. And pretty much doing everything. It's a relatively small organization in terms of the team is only 7 or 8 people in the office in London.
So could you tell us more about what Zahra Trust does? Because I'm sure I'm sure a lot of our listeners haven't heard of it. I'm sure a few people have. But it'd be good to hear from you. I mean, you're the marketing comms guy now, so
yeah,
do a good job.
The thing is, as you know, I'm not the best at like doing formal elevator pitches or anything like that. But essentially, it's a charity that works on kind of upliftment of people around the world. The main areas we operate in are Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Lebanon, and many others. I still need to, familiarize myself with all the territories. No, I do know. I just don't want to bore you. No, so yeah, like in terms of the work, I mean, we do a lot of stuff with orphans and widows in Iraq specifically, and actually just, if I can kind of go on a little bit, one of the things that I really like, so I went to Iraq in my second or third month with the organization, and we went to the office in Najaf, and one of the things that I actually found incredible was that an important initiative they have is that widows come in every day and basically make grant appeals, and they come in, asking for support and all that kind of stuff. And there's a fridge in the office that doesn't so it's a glass door fridge, so you can see inside, and it's like well lit, and it's left prominently in the office. And the reason they've done that is that they stock it with nice drinks, like the top of the range stuff that we were getting offered when we go there, all the nice juices and the sodas and everything else. And the reason they do that is that they want the people that come there to feel like guests, and they want to make sure that the staff aren't lazy, because if there's no glass door, then they can't see what's in there already, right? So you can just say, oh, we've only got water, sorry, here you go. But that element of dignity is really important. And so it's like, even if you're forcing the staff into like twisting their arm and making sure that they go the extra mile, the fact is that that's instilled within everything that's happening there, even to that sort of micro level, which was something I thought was really nice. And they also make sure that even if, for example, we don't support your grant application, they still always give like a little toy for the kids, so that they're not leaving completely empty-handed. But like I said, like the ethos of dignity is really important in the way that things are done. To be honest, in terms of a lot of the other activities, it's kind of very similar to what you might see from other organizations. So housing, food, education, water. But like there's another project that I went to see, and they've built kind of houses. So on the road between Najaf and Karbala, there's some houses that have been built there for kind of the locals, and they're specifically for orphans and widows. And the requirement to live, it's not even a requirement, it's a request that's made by the trust, and that's that they keep their kids in education. That's it. And basically they get the keys to the house and they live there, and there's like a water filtration plant on site that provides clean drinking water to these houses, something that most people in Iraq wouldn't have anyway. So it's not just a case of bringing people from like down here to just a little bit higher, but it's trying to kind of lift them up as much as possible. And as I said, like the throughout the process, the respect element and everything else. There's one final case, if you will permit me, but like we went to a cancer hospital in Karbala, and there was we're actually going to be releasing a video very soon where we kind of interview this young girl's uncle, and basically she was in desperate need of cancer treatment, and the whole welfare system there is not great and everything else. And so through the trust, I think they're now in, I'm not sure where in Iran, but they've gone to Iran for treatment, and the girl's now getting radiotherapy and everything else. And inshallah, obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but this was something, and like I think for me it's still kind of hitting home the work that we're doing, because every time I'm seeing a case study and I'm watching a video and I'm kind of seeing someone say, oh, without the Zahra Trust, I don't know what our situation would be. It's incredibly humbling to be a part of that. And like I think also, me and you, Haseeb, we haven't had this conversation, but me and you have worked with charities, with the Muslim Vibe. We've been on the outside, we've looked inside, and I think the perception from the outside is very different to when you get on the inside. Because actually, like I've been almost a skeptic of the charity sector, and I still am to a large extent, because I think there's a lot of mismanagement and wastage and everything else, and I don't mean within the Zahra Trust, but generally within the sector. We've seen it ourselves. But when it comes to actually getting down to the essence of upliftment and trying to change people's lives and give people opportunities and everything else, that whole process and being a part of that is incredibly special, and very humbling as well.
We met. We were doing little. I think some of the team members organised like a little farewell dinner thing.
Yeah,
and we met then, and we kind of caught up, and we were talking about what you've been working on at the Zahra Trust then, right? And you shared this like amazing, like fascinating story, right?
Yeah.
Of this kid that needed a very rare drug that cost, well, how much is it? $2 million or something?
$2.1 million.
$2.1 million. And I remember that, like, I came back home, I told my wife that story as well. I was like, well, that's crazy. Like, it's nice to see that Salim's actually doing something worthwhile, right? He could have been doing anything else. Share that story with us, because that honestly, that was really intense, and I was following it kind of unfold on social media too at the same time. So, yeah.
So this was my second or third week working at the Zahra Trust, and Sheikh Masumian, the head of the trust, was in town. He usually lives in Iraq, but he was in town for a few weeks, and he came in one day, and he's like, we're having a meeting at 10:30 about this boy. I was like, okay, fine. I was like, what is it? He's like, we need to raise $2.1 million because this boy needs an injection that will save his life. And again, my reaction, like everybody, is like, 2.1 million is a lot of money. How are we going to do that? He's like, it's our duty. We have to try. If this was your kid, like, you would do anything you could to try and save his life. We have to do this. And I couldn't really argue with that. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And then we went into the meeting, and we got the background. And so what it is, Mehdi is his name. He has spinal muscular atrophy type 1, which is the most aggressive form of the 4 types of spinal muscular atrophy. And his chances of living beyond the age of 2 are slim to none. So he was, at the time, I believe, 6 or 7 months old. And the family who live in Iraq had locally fundraised. They had asked the government. They had basically done everything and anything they could to try and raise this money. And they were still working on it, but they had asked for help. And I can't remember how it got to us. But they had kind of been around, and they had spoken to a lot of different charities, and a lot of people had that same reaction of, well, 2.1 million is a lot. Imagine what we can do with that, everything else. And there is, like, you know, I've had that ethical, moral conversation a million times, but I mean, specifically, this is my response even to myself was that I can't save the whole world. I don't intend to. That's not what I'm here for. But this one kid's life is there. This problem is in front of me. There's this limited amount of money, which is $2.1 million, needs to be raised. If I can help kind of facilitate that in any way, then that's the challenge I've got to try and, you know, solve. So to cut a long story short, we did a fundraising campaign. So, you know, we gave just what before, we could from.
Sorry, Sam. Just to cut you off. Just before that, do you mind telling us a little bit about what that disease is?
Yeah, it's I'm not a doctor, but it's a degenerative muscle disease. So essentially, the way that it ultimately kills you is that your muscles weaken to the point that I think the muscles that are required for breathing stop working, and you essentially die. And so this is the thing. I mentioned that I went to meet Mehdi I went to Iraq in my second month on the job. We actually met Mehdi and his father and mother in Najaf, and that was actually incredibly difficult because at the time we hadn't raised all the money and time was against us. I think the optimal time to receive this drug is before the age of 9 or 10 months, and we were there or thereabouts already. So already whilst the chances are very high, and by the way, this is the crazy thing. It's not like a treatment plan for 2 years. It's one injection that costs $2.1 million. Now, how the company justify this in their own heads, I don't know. I'm sure there's a justifiable reason for the steep price tag. But what they do from like a PR perspective is that every year they put all the kids who have SMA, all their names into a hat, and apparently they pick one name out in like a raffle system, and that kid gets the drug for free. Everybody else has to pay 2.1 million or essentially die. It's pretty grim, you know, when you actually think about this. It's horrible, but it's available just about on the NHS, but not all cases are applicable. There was like a family recently where the kid, I think, was either too old, or there were some other factors where it wouldn't have been as certain to have worked as it could have. So initially the NHS weren't going to give the drug to the kid. Then there was a petition and they kicked up some fuss, and I think they managed to. Coming back to Mehdi, so they had done pre-tests, and essentially the pre-test confirmed that this drug would be effective and it would work. All we had to do was raise the money. So we set up a crowdfunding campaign, but we kind of knew this was going to have to come from larger donors. And I guess to cut a long story short, and for the purpose of the donor actually wanting anonymity in all of this, we required $500,000. Everything else had kind of, we'd collected little bits here and there and slightly larger donations. We required $500,000, and one almost random, but anonymous donor came forward and gave the full amount. There's in the $500,000 that was required. And to be honest, I thought I would feel like this wave of emotion, but you know me, I'm a bit too emotionless. So I was basically just like, okay, fine, we've got the pledge. Now I need to cash. I need to get the check cashed. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, from the pledge till actually tying everything up and getting the money together, it must have been 2 weeks or something. It was crazy. There's a whole longer story which I can tell you offline. But once we finally got it, the drug was ordered. That takes 2 weeks to arrive, and then Mehdi had that one injection. And there was this video. I'll send you this afterwards so you can check it out. But there's this video that his family posted where, a few months ago, he was lying down on his stomach, and if you lifted his head up, and they put a pillow underneath, but you lift his head up, it just flops straight back down. But now, so he's still got 3 months or 4 months of therapy and rehab to go through. But now he can actually lie down on his stomach and lift his neck up.
Lift neck up, yeah.
And it gives you goosebumps, because even when we saw him, he was a big kid. He's 6 months, and I'm looking at my own son who's now 4 or 5 months, and I can see he can lift his neck up, look around, and everything else. And when you think of a child at that age who literally can't do anything, his legs had started to swell because they weren't being used. And this is why the longer you leave it, the more dangerous it can become. But yeah, like you said, you said in jest, oh, it's good that I'm making the most of my time, whatever. But it's actually incredible to be a part of something like that. I didn't do anything. I probably gave a tenner when I set up the fundraising page myself. That was it. But then being able to facilitate and I guess being used by God to be a part of Mehdi's life and journey, and who knows, what can happen from here. But yeah, alhamdulillah, to cut a long story short, his treatment was a success, and he's now still in Dubai, I believe, going through the whole rehab process. But that was very intense. I did not expect that when I signed up for this role. I just thought, put a few social media posts out and that'll be it. But it was, that's when you realize how real this is. And then also meeting him, and when you put a face to a person and a story, and you look in the father's eyes, it's a different thing altogether.
No, for sure. I remember, because obviously whilst you were doing the fundraising for that, it was all kind of taking place on social media as well. And just kind of seeing the updates in real time almost. It was quite intense. But subhanallah, there's some very generous people out there that have the wealth to be able to kind of save a life like that, because obviously $2.1 million is not cheap. But every life is precious, right? Salim, so tell me a little bit about what your plans are for the future at Zahra Trust.
Honestly, and I think I've realized this throughout this whole kind of leaving TMV process, is that I really take each day as it comes, and almost frustratingly so. And you'll have experienced this. You
sound like one of those guys that's you're about to retire on a yacht, and it's I just take every day as it comes,
But see, you know what I mean? I
walking around in your slippers and Hawaiian shirt.
I've never believed in like a 2-year plan or a 5-year plan. Like you know, honestly, I'm very much a here and now guy. So like even a month before I decided to leave TMV, I couldn't have told you that was on the radar, because I don't know. I really don't know. So I don't have a master plan. I keep thinking like I'm in my 30s now. I need to have a master plan. But honestly, whatever opportunities come up, whichever direction life takes me in, it's getting more and more cliche the more I say it now. I can just hear it. But genuinely, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
No, I hear you, man. Look, I ended up in California. Like, as in, think about it from like the time we first met, right?
Yeah.
8 years ago, 9 years ago. And if as in, it's just not even, it was not nowhere near the equation for it to be like, oh, at some point I'm going to end up in California. Like, I'm some dude from like Barking. You've seen where I've come from. You literally, you saw the council estates in the ghetto that I came from. And it's just like, okay, now I'm out here and it's like sunny in November and stuff, you know, like it's weird, man. But yeah, no, you're right. Like life, I mean, Allah decides, right? That's basically what's happening, right? And we're just kind of making ourselves, we're just trying to show up in the best way. And I guess whatever he plans will be the best plan. Yeah, no, for sure.
I think the one thing as well is that like a lot of people said, and even I thought at the time when I was like leaving, that it's going to be difficult to leave. You know, it's like it's your baby. You've worked on this project for 7 years, and blah blah blah. The podcast, and naturally, I miss a lot of things about the Muslim Vibe. I miss the conversations. I miss the people. I miss the office, the banter, the dynamics, everything that we had going. But hand on heart, like, am I emotionally attached to the project? No, not at all. Because for me, it was always just a means to doing the work. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it was a part of the thing. So this is why, like, when I look at an opportunity, like where I am now working at the Zahra Trust, for me, it's the same thing. I don't care whose name is on the door. I don't care that I'm not the director or the guy running the show. It's still doing the same work. And I think that's been quite an empowering and almost like a liberating thing, because I know now that like I'm not actually even that jump from self-employment to employment is long. Like, you know, having to have like designated time off and having to turn up on time and be answerable and dress a certain way and whatever. It's not as fun as like just rocking up in the summers in like t-shirts and shorts. But all of that stuff's not important for me anyway. For me, it's just about being able to kind of do the work. And that's been honestly very empowering, because, you know, like we've spoken about projects and things that we've been involved in the past, and I'm always telling you, like, you need to be able to detach yourself and like emotionally and this and that. And it's very easy to say, but then I got to experience it for myself, and honestly, I found it a very seamless experience. In a weird way, but like in a very positive way as well, I think.
Obviously, there's thing about timing, right? Like, as in, obviously, it was at a time in your life where it was meant to be. Like, as in that June, you're saying, like, for example, your son Laith was born. You know, just after Ramadan. You know, sometimes there's these moments where it's a good time to make a move. You know, like, for example, you know, like this year, I also resigned from a non-profit project that we co-founded, right? You'd stepped away from that for a few years now, but even for me, it was like, it's going to be some emotional, like, goodbye, and, you know, those kind of things. But, you know, a lot of that's just in our head, and I guess we're like, it's things that we learn, right? Like, as in how things should be. Even like, as in, you know, it's weird to maybe talk about this on a podcast, but, you know, like, for example, when people found out that you had resigned, right? So the first thing they would call me and be like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Chill. Are you guys still friends? Are you guys still speaking?" I'm like, "Listen, mate, this ain't some like Pakistani drama, right?"
Yeah.
Because one of the first things that we kind of made clear from the beginning of our partnership, that there was going to be no drama. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Whichever way it goes, right? None of this kind of like nonsense and politics, right? But I guess people I guess we just become too used to hearing those stories, so it's like you almost live it, and that's not reality.
the awkwardness is that, like, so last week, 2 weeks ago, I went to like some social event, some
Of
kid's
course you
birthday.
did.
Not, it was a kid's birthday. I was gonna
A
say,
kid's
I say
birthday,
social event. It
kid's
sounds
birthday,
like
and it's a networking event for Salim.
no, it was like it was actually quite weird because all of the parents.
Wait,
there
are you
were
talking
people I
about?
grew
Are you
up
talking
with.
about Layla's birthday party?
My own kid's birthday?
Yeah.
No, that's not the social event that I'm referring to. No, it was another kid's birthday, and like I was talking to one of the guys there, and then he messaged me a few days later, and he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you left the Muslim Vibe. I just found out. Like, is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's all fine." Like, you know, that same thing you're just saying, and then you're just it's annoying because it's constantly ongoing. So like today, someone messaged in a group. They wanted me to play football, and they were like, "Oh, come on, you can you can talk about our techers on the Muslim Vibe." I don't even bother saying I'm not involved with the Muslim Vibe anymore, because then that opens that whole can of worms. But I think it's going to be one of those things that it's going to take a few years to kind of get past those awkward conversations.
You need to get some billboards out there, mate. You need to.
I need to come out as atheist or something. And then it'd be like, he can't be involved with the Muslim Vibe, guys. But I don't know how, honestly.
Might need to edit that.
Yeah, no, obviously not. But you know what I mean? Like it's yeah. Like I think people love a scandal.
The thing is, it became also like, especially when you took over the podcast, it became very synonymous with you, right? And you were doing such a good job at it. Because I remember as well, even with the podcast. Like,
thank you very much.
I think the first like 5 to 10 episodes that you did, they weren't great, and I'll tell you, right? And I'm like, Salim, you know, it's not vibing, it's not connecting, right? But then I remember just like one episode, I don't know what happened. You just flipped a switch, and I'm listening to it in the car, and I'm like, yo, actually I can listen to this for an hour now. Like, I'm like, whoa, this is actually really good, right? And then you just like went on a nice streak. You built up like our base of listeners and stuff, all 7 of them. No, but mashallah, you did a really good job, and that's the thing. The podcast became something that people were actually talking about in the community and stuff. They could actually hear about it, right? Like, as in, I remember even when I came out here to visit my in-laws in California, there was like a whole conversation about that podcast that we did on the gay Muslim thing. And that podcast in particular became like a household conversation, right? Like, people were very much like, whoa, like,
oh yeah, 100%, yeah.
Right, and I had so much good feedback about the way you handled the conversation, the way you kind of like, you know, the way you know, essentially the whole thing was packaged and presented in a way that was balanced and Islamic. So no, you did a really good job with the podcast, man. That's why, like, when you decided to leave.
That was the first thing you asked me. You're like, "Oh, can you still hold the podcast?"
Okay, that's fine. Like, leave. I don't mind you leaving. Can you just still do the podcast? Because honestly, because it's like, you know, I guess hosting is something that I'm gonna have to like develop my skills on and stuff. But no, honestly, you did a really good job with the podcast, Salim. And
you know what?
Also, as chief editor as well. Like, mashallah, like you grew a lot more, the Muslim Vibe.
Yeah, too much. It's okay. Don't worry.
So I was gonna do a lot of praising, but let's just
I'm cutting it short. But I was gonna say it's actually a lot more fun being on the hosting end than on the guest end, because like on the guest end, number one, like every time you open your mouth to say something, I'm like on edge. I'm like, oh my God, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna ask me? And also the pressure's on like me as the guest, for example, to kind of be the one that's keeping the listeners engaged, right?
You're loving
Whereas
it. You've been rambling on and on. You've
you've
shared everything.
I've had a lot of coffee this day.
You love being a guest.
No, genuinely, it's awful. Because the presenter role is nice, because you actually you get to sit there, listen, and then push and probe and just do all of that stuff. So I think you'll love it. Honestly, like it's a lot of fun. But you just need to. Like, I think that the idea that you've got is obviously the first few to kind of interview people that you already know and are safe in that sense. I think that's a good thing. And also, like, try and push a few buttons with them, see how they react. Because especially when it's like a recorded setting, you know, feel free to throw some curveballs at me, see what happens. I'll just walk away and not come back. But yeah, like I think that's a good idea, and then kind of getting into it. But I hope you'll love it as much as I did, because
no, inshallah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Great.
And And you know what? One thing, Salim, is like obviously over here in California, in terms of time difference, I think I should be okay in that. Obviously, with people in the UK, if I wanted to interview them, um, like 8 a.m. Well, I'm not gonna do 8 a.m. ever again, but like 11 a.m. will still be like evening time. Your time is like evening time, which I think
Yeah.
is okay for some guests to be able to do like to record a podcast.
I think most people wanted evenings, but I would always push for
Exactly,
daytime because I wanted it in the
exactly.
working hours. Yeah.
And then I've also got like this American Muslims that I really want to explore, right? And that's my whole thing at the moment, right? Like, as in at the moment, I've just been kind of getting my base set up here, getting into the routine and rhythm of having an office and my own workspace over here. Of course, the idea really is to start exploring um, this phenomena of American Islam, right, and American Muslims, because it's very different. Like we've discussed this in the past. I'm married to an American Muslim, so I can say these things. Like it's a different situation to the UK completely, you know. And I want to explore that because it's not like to say it's a bad thing, like they're bad or like lesser than British Muslims, but the culture is just very different, and it's very nuanced, right? As my favorite word is like nuanced differences, you know.
You have to do this every time with your hand.
Nuance, right? No, it's so I'm excited to actually kind of have those conversations.
Let me ask you a question. Since you asked me, so since I left the Muslim vibe, and you've moved to America, I'm sure things are probably significantly different. So what's in the pipelines for TMV? What's the plan now? How are you gonna, I guess, also manage things remotely or like with like a that whole setup that you got going on?
So
over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Salim. So this is
unscripted, by the way.
You set me up quite nicely because obviously the plan was.
Were you planning to do this anyway?
Huh? No. I was talking about the actual thing that you did when you resigned in June. Essentially, what you had done is you set my June to September to, as Michael Scott would say, threat level midnight, right? So September, I already had a deadline in mind anyway that I was gonna leave and move to America. Okay.
Yeah.
Which was difficult as it was, and then you threw this spanner in the works, which is, hey, I'm resigning. All right.
You are welcome.
And I have there's no hard feelings on that. But basically, what that meant was that June, July, August, September, I had to work like triple like energy to kind of set up new processes, understand and take over the things that you were doing, the things that I didn't enjoy doing, like operations and stuff like that. I've had countless voice notes and phone calls and meetings and emails and documents and all this kind of stuff. So that's basically what that was like. But the idea is that I wanted to move to America. Oh, and in the middle of it, we also had to move the team's office, right? But the idea is that I wanted to have all that stuff sorted out by September, which alhamdulillah, everything came together perfectly, right? With God's blessings. And now we're over here. The future for the Muslim Vibe in terms of growth now, so I'm actually really excited to share with you, is that we're going to be launching quite a few sub-brands under the Muslim Vibe now. Basically, the Muslim Vibe as a brand itself is fine. But that we kind of shot ourselves in the foot in that we started creating very diverse content for everyone, right? But the algorithms of today, and I guess the way people are today when it comes to like absorbing content, that's not how they interact with it. You want to subscribe to a YouTube channel based on the fact that, you know when you subscribe to a YouTube channel, that's a deep commitment, right? Because subscription button's not that easy to click on.
For you, it's a deep commitment, not for me.
Okay, but do you go around subscribing to YouTube channels?
I don't subscribe to anything.
Exactly, right? So it's a hard push. That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is like, video 1, 2, 3 you see on YouTube, right? You like them, and then you subscribe. Now you're expecting that fourth video to be the same as the first 3 that you've seen, right? Or at least similar to, right? Now, if that fourth video is completely different, it's an hour long documentary about, I don't know, history or something.
Yeah.
You're not going to engage with that, right? So essentially, that's how we've built the Muslim Vibe. Was that we have these like short videos going out, we have these viral videos going out, we have these documentaries going out, we've got podcasts going out, and essentially it wasn't sticking for everyone. So we've got a big follower, mashallah, alhamdulillah, but they're all following us for very different reasons. So I want to cure that by developing these new sub brands for the Muslim vibe. So, for example, I want to branch out our news content to its own specific profiles. So, like TMV News, and that's just all news content, right? So, Muslim news stories from around the world, and that's it, you know. But then the one that I'm really excited about, inshallah, is going to be called My Muslim Family. So this is going to be essentially a content space for Muslim families, so parents. Basically, the idea is to kind of explore the best ways for this generation, our generation, to raise a proper Muslim family, and kind of really talk about those issues that we're struggling with, because we are struggling, you know, right? You've got 2 kids, I've got 1, right? And we're worried about so many different things, right? We're worried about social media, we're worried about technology, we're worried about culture, we're worried about, you know, this sexualization and all this various different things, drugs and all sorts. But there's no space right now to have that kind of open and candid conversation. So inshallah, that's going to be the first project that we're going to be kind of putting a lot of energy into. It'll be a separate brand to the Muslim vibe, but it'll, you know, for all intents and purposes, is part of the Muslim vibe.
Nice.
There is another project, but you know about that one, but I want to keep that hush hush for a while.
Offline. Very good. Well, no, it's good, man. I think actually, wait, you're the host. You got to speak now.
No, I actually like this.
I slipped into natural. Okay, let me just.
I know, and then I switched into guest mode. So let's do it. You end the show. You can end this. You can end this episode.
Well, thank you, Haseeb, for giving me the opportunity to talk about my time at the Muslim Vibe. Look, I think it's like definitely the podcast is something I'm gonna miss. I will maybe wait like a year and then like listen back to all of them chronologically, just to go through the cringe of the first few episodes, and then hopefully, you know, listen to some better conversations after that. But I will be listening back to the podcast, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully it goes well. And yeah, you remember I always used to hate ending the podcasts, so I don't know why you made me do this again.
I know you didn't. You never ended a podcast. You were just like, yeah.
So
Salam.
okay.
Okay. All right. No, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Salim. It's been a pleasure working with you for 7 years. Thank you so much for everything you've done at the Muslim Vibe. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for the brotherhood.
You make out like we're never going to speak again. We're going to chat.
No, we are, but this is just like official, isn't it? So this is on the record. Yeah, this is on the record conversation. Off the record.
Okay.
You know, we'll have another conversation about it. But no, honestly, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, man, I want to appreciate it, because, you know, not everyone has. I can say this now, right? Like, I'm working in 4 walls, literally in the middle of a desert. Like, you've seen my surroundings, right? But like working with someone that you're so close to, like, for 7 years, like your best friend, that's like an amazing privilege. And you know, some people will say that like you don't make the best of moments like that, but I genuinely feel like we actually made the best of those moments. Like when we were not bothered to work and we said, you know what, let's just go get some lunch, we would go get some lunch, you know. We'd actually enjoy our lives, you know. We actually enjoyed working together. And at least I'm saying that, but like, I actually enjoyed it every day, you know. Every day was exciting to come into the office, and it was just jokes, you know.
I wouldn't say every day, but no, I agree. I think we were definitely lucky to have spent. And then you say 7 years, it was more like 9 years because of ours to be creative and everything before that. So we spent almost 10 years working together. Mm-hmm. And I think whilst we definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way in both, you know, the business and TMV and everything else, I feel like we were lucky and blessed that the kind of the team that we built and like the office atmosphere and environment that we built around us was very nice. And like you said, you know, there was that kind of atmosphere where I did genuinely look forward to going to the office every day. You don't know what's going to happen.
We should have recorded it, man.
What random like fight's going to kick off today in the office? Like who's going to get pissed off about what? Obviously, like all in jest, but still, like there was always those the tax conversations.
Gone.
Like so just so everyone is aware. Like we used to have a few people in the office that were obsessed. They were all self-employed. Used to love talking about tax, and Haseeb would just, for example, say to me like, "Oh, Salim, what's what happens above 20k and you have 2 children tax? He would just say something speculative and random, and then you would just get 3 hyenas in the room looking up, and then just start arguing with each other about the implications of the question.
And that would just sit back and just make like very immature noises to egg them on.
And then chuck like a little cluster grenade into the situation every now and then.
Oh my
Be
God.
like, but what about the P45? And then that's it. They all kick off again. It was so much fun. Those are good times. I echo a lot of what you said. It has been an amazing journey, I think. And like you said, we're lucky. And to be honest, like I said, on the emotional side or the sentimental side, I just feel like it everything ran its course, happened as it should have. You know, there was like a natural end in the season, if this was a TV show. With you moving to America, us moving office, me changing roles, like that's it. And alhamdulillah, sure. I think it's worked out for the best.
Alhamdulillah. And also the team's in a very nice office right now.
Yeah, I love the space. I've been down there.
They've upgraded to the better room as well recently.
I haven't seen the new one. I need to go check it out.
Yeah, go check it out. To be fair, it's the old team is back together again. It's just me and you that's left, basically.
Lovely. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, Salim. It's been a pleasure. And I hope we will have another conversation soon. So that was it. That was our conversation. It was emotional at times for me. To be honest with you, towards the end, I was getting quite emotional there because I just started thinking about a lot of the memories, a lot of the fun memories that we had. Me and Salim, we've been working together for 10 years, pretty much, and been good friends a little bit longer than that as well. And, life just happened in a way where this year, he's moved on somewhere else. I've moved to another country. Alhamdulillah, the TMV is still kind of, doing its thing, but things are just a bit different, and alhamdulillah for that. It's all part of God's amazing plan that He has written for us. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know it's slightly different to what you're probably used to. Inshallah, we're going to be speaking to different types of guests. As I've mentioned, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I've moved to California, and there's a lot of interesting things that we're looking to do out here. Namely, I really want to speak to American Muslims because their experience compared to UK Muslims is very, very different. Even though we speak the same language, we have so much, we share so much in terms of like our kind of culture, right? The Western culture that we're both part of. Things are just very different here, and even state to state, and even between states and cities, there's big cultural differences that I'm really keen to explore. So inshallah, we're going to be having a nice mix of both British and American guests going forward, which should be quite fun, and I think it should provide a lot of insight for us as well. Just before I go, I just wanted to kind of shed light on that project that I just mentioned as well during the podcast. So we're working on a new project called My Muslim Family, and the idea behind that is creating a platform for Muslim parents, right? Based in the West, and something that really helps them deal with the issues that they're struggling with. And if you're a parent, Muslim or not, to be fair, you know how difficult it is, right? And there's so much that you have to think about, right? And the family is such an important, integral part of society. So we realize that there's a big gap there, really, where there's no conversation taking place. And essentially what's happening now is you've got young Muslims now having children without the right guidance, if that makes sense, or without the right support. I don't want to use the word guidance because this project really isn't about anyone knowing what they need to do. No one knows what they need to do when it comes to being a parent. But the idea is for us to kind of collectively as a community explore, how we can go about raising a successful Muslim family and a God-centric one. So that's the idea behind the project. So inshallah, if you guys want to get involved, you have any questions, any suggestions, please do reach out, let me know. You can do that in the comments below, or you can reach out to us via any of our social media platforms. But yeah, I'll be really, really keen to have everyone on board with that journey as well. That's going to be a complete separate band to the Muslim Vibe, and inshallah we'll see you there too. Salim never knew how to do those outros properly, and I've had a few ideas of like quirky things that I could do at the end of a podcast that would be like our signature thing. But now that I'm here, I I really don't know how to do it. So I'm probably just going to do it like Salim, where we end with a little bit of a ramble and like an abrupt end. All right, guys, take care. Salam.